Hello, are you interested in learning more about horses? Check out our Extension Horses Hippology Academy. We have separate sessions on all kinds of interesting topics. Here is a taste of the bits session.
Welcome to Hippology Academy. I'm Dr. Bob Coleman from the University of Kentucky, and it's my pleasure to have the opportunity to discuss with you some things about bits. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I find it very fascinating when you look at all that's available to us as horse owners and what we can use to ride or drive our horses. Bits have been around a long time, and they were developed in order to provide better control for the rider and the driver when they were using their horses. Some of this development of tack and equipment led to the development of mega empires. And why did they become mega empires? It's because they had better armies, because the riders had better control of their horses, thanks to being able to use bits. While we have had some changes in bits, some of the basic philosophy behind what they do and how they're constructed really hasn't changed. So we use bits as part of our communication program with our horses. Not the sole source of communication, but one part. So as we're riding, we can use our bits to communicate that we want to stop. We can communicate that we would like to change direction or turn. We can help the horse to regulate its speed by how much pressure we put on the bridle reins, how much contact do we have that can help regulate speed. And certainly we can use it to help the horse go in the frame that we want the horse to go, whether we're in the arena or out on the trail. So lots of different things that we can use the bit for, and it's really that communication and how it provides that rather than just generally what kind of bit it is. When we choose a bit, we need to think about some basic things. First and foremost, it always should be about the horse. How old is our horse? What level of training does the horse have? And is there any particular need that the horse has? You'll have some horses that prefer a certain style of bit, and it might be what the bit is made of. It could be the weight of the bit, and it could certainly be how it fits in the horse's mouth. And we need to take all of those things into consideration. What we're doing with our horse, our activity or our discipline, if we are in a competitive discipline, then there may be rules that dictate the kind of bits we can use in the activity that we're participating in. And so we need to understand what the rules are and what those rules dictate as to the kind of bit we can use. And then there's us, the riders. And I guess it also would be the driver. So what's our ability to ride or drive our horses? How good are we with our hands and the other parts of communication, our legs, our seat? And can we handle, a certain kind of bit? Is there something that's better for us? Because like our horse, that's where we're comfortable. We also need to understand exactly what it is that we're putting in our horse's mouth and understanding how it works, what it can, and also what it cannot do. So there's things that we need to think about. So we're going to worry about our horse first and foremost. We need to think about what it is we're doing and if we have to follow particular rules. And sometimes we just have to look at ourselves and say, I'm more comfortable riding with this kind of bit, and so is my horse, so I think I'm going to do that. When we look at bits, in reality, there are two basic kinds. There's a snaffle bit and there's a curb bit. And how they function is what makes them different. It is not necessarily how they're constructed. If we look at the picture in the bottom, we have a jointed mouthpiece snaffle bit, and then we have a jointed mouthpiece curb bit. Those are jointed mouthpieces. They are the same mouthpiece, or philosophically they're the same mouthpiece on two different kinds. So it's not the mouthpiece that dictates what kind of bit it is. It is how it works. All bits and bridles put pressure on the horse when we put them on, so it can impact the corners of the horse's mouth, the bars of the horse's mouth, or the interdental space. How much pressure does it put on the tongue? The construction and style of bit may impact the palate or the roof of the horse's mouth. Again, depending on the kind of bit we have, are we going to impact the curb area? Are we going to impact the pole? And there are some of the bits out there that also may put pressure on the horse's nose. We're not going to talk about those bits in this presentation. We're going to focus on 1 through 6 as the areas of pressure and look at it as to how do the different kinds of bits impact those areas. There are some things that all bits have in common. There's a way to attach them to the headstall, there's a way to attach the reins, and they all have a mouthpiece. So those things are all pretty common and all bits have them. So if we look at it, some of the common pieces, but most importantly, we look at the bit and the mouthpiece. Is it thick or thin? A lot of impact from that is how does that mouthpiece impart pressure to the horse. A thicker mouthpiece will disperse the pressure in a greater area and is often thought of to be a much softer or gentler bit on the horse, versus a very thin mouthpiece, which is going to really concentrate the pressure from our hands and have a little more strength in the message that it sends to the horse. Is one better than the other? No, they're just different. And depending on your horse, you may want to think about what fits the best in your horse's mouth. Well, the book says that fatter bit or thicker bit's going to be the most gentle. If it doesn't fit very well in your horse's mouth, it's going to create a degree of discomfort, and so it's maybe not the best one to pick. How heavy bits are, certainly how solid is the mouthpiece. Some horses prefer a little more weight because they like to hold the bit. Other horses prefer a lighter bit. So you need to kind of think about it, and that's where, knowing your horse really helps. And then how many pieces is that mouthpiece? Is it 2, as we would see in a typical jointed mouthpiece? Is there 3 pieces? Are there 4 pieces? Are there multiple pieces? And again, how do those impact the horse and affect the way the bit works? The shape of the mouthpiece. Generally, we think they're round, but they could also be oval, which is going to change again how the pressure is dispersed over those areas in the horse's mouth. You'll have some that are a square, and that's going to provide an edge that will concentrate some pressure, and so that's going to be a little stronger message to the horse, much stronger than a rounder and oval one. And then there are also some bits that are a triangle shape, which has a very strong message because it has a very sharp area that really puts concentrated pressure on the horse's mouth. And then there's also the ones that are mullins. So if we look at the pictures on the right, there are some twisted bits. That copper one at the top has got a twist to it. Then there's just a smooth round mouth bit. The next one is a square, and then we have a twisted wire. So how they impact the horse is all a little bit different. The picture on the left is more of a mullin or a shaped mouthpiece, and that's becoming more common because it does give a little more room for the horse's tongue. And in a lot of cases, horses really prefer this because of how it fits in their mouth and makes it a lot more comfortable. We have lots of different mouthpieces though. When we look at all the shapes and sizes and looking at how they function, how they work, a great deal of diversity in our selection, but it also can be where we have to look at what do we need for our horse, what can we ride with, and what do the rules allow. And so we have everything from rubber to all sorts of different shapes that can be on the bit. When we look at some of the differences with the multiple pieces, so the kind of the common ones, and sometimes you will hear people talk about some of these, particularly the French link, because it's a three-piece bit. Some will call that French link, or the link in the middle, a dog bone. There are some, as the next one, they would call it a lozenge. They operate very much the same in how they fit over top of the horse's tongue and disperse the pressure. Some horses like the different kinds, and certainly some riders like to have a lozenge connector versus the French link. And then the bottom one is the Dr. Bristol, which, while it looks somewhat similar, it has a much different center mouthpiece. And the way it sits on the horse's tongue, it does provide a much stronger message to the horse when pressure is applied, because it is going to sit at an angle on the horse's tongue. So that edge is going to be what dictates the message from your hands. And as you can imagine, sort of a fun fact, Dr. Bristol bit was invented by, yes, Dr. Bristol. And it actually started out being a driving bit, but now it has transformed itself and is also seen in some barns where it's used for horses that are being ridden. When we think about those multiple pieces, this is just an interesting diagram that shows how it changes the way the pressure is dispersed once we pick up on the reins and we put contact on that bridle. So when we have the one on the left, which is just a single joint, a typical jointed mouthpiece, it is going to really get a hold of the horse's tongue and also put some pressure on the bars. And it actually, if you pull back really hard, will nutcracker or act like that, and can be a very strong message to the horse. And depending on your hands and your horse's mouth, that nutcracker effect can actually cause that center joint to impact the roof of the horse's mouth. Versus the multiple piece, the three-piece bit on the right, is not going to nutcracker. It's going to change how the pressure across the tongue is, so it's a little more diverse, maybe a little more comfortable for the horse. And again, you'll have horses that like one style of bit or the other, and riders who are more comfortable with one style or the other. But when we have multiple pieces in that mouthpiece, it is going to conform to the horse's mouth and to its tongue in a much different way, and that changes how the horse feels the pressure. What we make them out of, they've been made out of a large number and a wide variety of materials, and we're just going to cover some of the basic ones. But you will see on some of the bits what's called a sweet iron. It's basically just a steel, cold rolled steel. And people talk about it as sweet because it is easily rusted. And so you'll see some steel bits that have some rust on them, some mouthpieces that have some rust on them, and that we might look at and say, well, I don't know if I can put that in my horse's mouth because it's all rusty. And yet some horses really do seem to appreciate and like the taste of what that sweet iron bit does. So it has actually been noted that sweet iron mouthpieces will help the horse to produce saliva, and that helps to keep his jaw and his mouth soft. Copper bits have been around, and again for the same reason, because copper is known to, or believed to, provide some degree of salivation to the horse, and again keeping that mouth soft. You will see now that the copper in a lot of the bits has changed. Copper is very soft, and so it can be easily chewed on by the horse and kind of damage that mouthpiece. And so now we're starting to see copper alloys that still have the salivation property of copper, but are a little bit harder. Stainless steel, probably the most common, if not the most common material used for making bits, both mouthpieces, rings, and shanks. Doesn't have a lot of taste to it, but it's easy to clean, very durable, lasts a long time. Aluminum has come and gone, certainly as a mouthpiece material. We still see aluminum used to make, typically in Western or in shanked bits or curb bits, that we will see aluminum shanks in order to lighten up the bit. but not very often is the mouthpiece. One of the things about aluminum is that it actually has a drying effect, and so different than the sweet iron and the copper, where it actually may dry horses' mouths out. So not as popular anymore as a mouthpiece, but certainly still used in the construction of bits. A lot of people like to have rubber bits. They think that it's softer, it's easier. Certainly it's going to be something that's far more chewable, and horses will chew on their rubber bits. You may find that because it is soft and just the way the rubber bit works, that you may find that horses aren't as respectful of your communication through the bridle reins with a rubber bit. But you will also see them where it'll be rubber covering a steel, usually a stainless steel mouthpiece, so it just gives a little more diameter to the bit, and it also does give some horses something to chew on, whether we like that or not. The bit on the right, the Centaur, is a vulcanite, and it's a man-made product, very hard, but it does actually give the horses something that they can kind of hold in their mouth if they want to hold the bit, and sometimes they will get their teeth on it, because yes, horses do take the bit in their teeth and run. So there's that. The happy mouth is on the left. It is the top bit on the left. Again, it's an engineered kind of a plastic material. Again, something that the horses can hold on to. They seem to like it in some cases. It is a material that covers a metal core, so that there is some strength there, and you will get some of those that actually come flavored, and maybe that's what your horses like. You don't have a picture of a leather bit. They are in two different forms. You can get them where they are actually just leather, and it's multiple pieces of leather that are sewn together. And again, a horse that likes something that they can kind of hold easily, chew a little bit, they will appreciate that. You will also find them where they are a metal bit, or there's some kind of a core that is leather covered. Again, they're kind of hard to take care of, because the horses will chew on them, and then they're with the saliva, they may not last as long as you'd like them to. But sort of the general things that we can go and select for our horse. And again, it comes back to that very early comment. What does your horse like, and what makes him comfortable and better to ride or drive. So we have all those choices. We can make up our mind, what kind of mouthpiece do we want, what kind of shape of mouthpiece do we want, and those sorts of things. And then now we're going to, on the next presentation, let's talk about the specific bits. Let's talk about the snaffle bit. And so we'll come back and talk about snaffles.